Hello everyone and welcome to this video lesson on MyPlate. Right? Government regulations by the USDA have given guidelines for 125 years. The current guidelines released in 2011 are now MyPlate. Now you can see the visual there on the right. Right? This is what the basis is for good, healthy food decisions. Now we'll dive into whether or not this is actually perfect, but there are positives and there are downfalls to MyPlate, and we're going to discover those today. Now, it's interesting to know, this goes to show a lot about what people know in nutrition education. They constantly talk about the food pyramid still. The food pyramid has not been around since 2011. All right, it started in 1992, but it is the basis for most food education across this country, and most people will remember the pyramid. Which is interesting to note because a lot of people don't realize that MyPlate has been around for almost 10 years, and they still refer to it as a food pyramid. It just goes to show you that all these changes are not kept up with most people in society. So why the change? Well, the change occurred in 2011. It was designed to create a much more simple visual for consumers to create a healthy plate at mealtime. Okay, so the pyramid was not direct in serving sizes or meal prep suggestions, and that MyPlate created a better visual. So you can see on the right with pyramid, it tells you how many servings you maybe should have, but what does that serving look like as far as a traditional meal plate? So again, MyPlate divides a typical meal plate into 5 sections. All right, fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. Right? Now, foods from each category are encouraged for a healthy diet. Now, depending on who you talk to within fitness or in food and nutrition, you do not necessarily need to fit everything in your guidelines all at one time or in one meal, but it can be broken up throughout the day or in a constrained amount of time. Okay? Now, I will have a small editorial and disclaimer that the 5 groups are usually added as not to alienate one economic sector over the other, and that it's more about spreading everybody's money out across all food, the whole food economy, as opposed to personal health. But anyway, I digress, and I will get into key concepts. First is to enjoy food, but eat less. Moderation. Avoid oversized portions. Okay, half of your plate should be fruits or vegetables, or double fruit or double vegetable, depending on when during the day you are eating. Half of your grains should be whole grains, and then protein can come from either animal or plant sources. So let's look into the groups more specifically. Grains is the first one. Now, USDA guidelines will say you should have 45 to 65% of your calories come from carbohydrates. What does that mean? Well, there's 4 calories per gram. So depending on the person, can it be anywhere from 900 to 15 or 1600 calories coming from grains or carbs. Now, why? Grains are the largest source of carbs and energy that a person will have. And now there are 2 types of categories within the grains. It's whole grains and refined grains. Refined grains are often enriched or have vitamins and minerals added to them. And whole grains still have the germ or the outside shell of the grain, and that gives it its more brown color. So the MyPlate suggestion is that you make at least half of them whole grains. Now, whole grains will show up as more calories on a food label, but it takes more energy to break down whole grains as opposed to refined grains, and therefore will speed up your metabolism. But you can see here's some on the right charts, depending on how old you are, how much you should have in a given day. Some popular grain foods that most of us know are bread, pasta, rice, oatmeal, different cereals, bagels, cakes, quinoa, grits, tortilla. Anything that has added sugar or starch, carbohydrates that are not grown. All right, those are popular grain foods. Okay. So what are some equivalents? A lot of people have a difficult time of what a serving is. Well, 1 slice of bread, or 1 cup of ready-to-eat cereal, or a half a cup of cooked rice, or pasta, those are all 1 ounce equivalents of grains. And it's pretty easy to hit these in a given day if you do this right. Okay. Some more equivalents that you can see. You can always pause this presentation and take notes if you wish, but you can see there's all kinds of different examples. Now, depending on who you talk to, grains, a lot of people think carbs are the enemy, carbs are the enemy. They're not necessarily the enemy, it's just how you appropriate and use your grains throughout your diet. That can be the problem. All right, moving on. We'll talk about proteins now. I feel like protein should be where you start. Most people don't. They start in the carb section because that's where you need to get more. But protein should be where you start. This is where you build your muscles and rebuild your body tissues. All right. So every time you move, you work your body tissues that eventually you're going to need to repair them over time. So recommended 10 to 35% of your calories should come from protein, which is ironic because if you look at most of the calculators and what they say the RDA number is, it actually is less than 10%. So you should actually have more protein than what they tell you. All right, you get 4 calories of energy per gram, and your protein needs will vary by your age, your size, your muscle mass, and your fitness needs. By having more proteins and using that as energy and rebuilding, your body will actually take the excess fat or glycogen that's in your body and burn that first, which can cause you to lean up. That's why the animal diet or keto diets or paleo diets are very popular. Other suggestions, you keep the meat and poultry portions lean with less fat. I do not think that the fat is on animal proteins are that bad. It's the added fats that come with carbs and added sugars that become the issue for most people. So MyPlate suggestions, they actually suggest you eat a little bit more fish, get omega fatty acids and lean, and they're very, very high in protein. And then other suggestions from MyPlate is to eat beans, which are a natural source of fiber and protein. Vegetarians will go after beans and lentils for their primary sources of protein, but if you do like your animal meat, balancing them out is not a bad thing as well. So on the right, you'll see the daily recommendations. How many ounces? 5 ounces for most. Teens, boys especially, you're growing so much, not with muscle, you would need a little bit more than the average person. Well, what does that look like? Well, popular protein foods: beef, ground beef, steak, pork, cutlets or ribs, poultry, seafood, legumes. These are beans, lentils, and peas. Eggs, one of the best foods you can possibly eat. It's got B12 vitamins and a very distinct amount of protein in it. It is considered a superfood and one of the best foods you can eat. Processed soy products, I'm not a huge fan. But if you are a vegetarian, this is where you would turn to. And then you can have nuts and seeds. So on the right, you can see these are all examples of 1 ounce equivalents. So if you need 5 or 6 servings, what you should have in a given day. These are the basics, the bare minimums. So 1 ounce of beef or poultry, 1 egg, 1 tablespoon, ½ ounce of nuts, all right, or a 1/4 cup of cooked beans. So most people are saying you should have 6 to 6.5 ounces. If all these are 1 ounce equivalent, that 6 eggs would give you your protein need for the day. And I find that that's probably a little bit low, but that's, the difference between, what you want to accomplish with your fitness goals. All right, let's look at some more. These are very popular examples as you get into more types of beans or different pieces of meat, and you can pause the presentation to find out which ones you would look to and what their ounce equivalents are. Great examples here, but protein, this should be your number 1 start. All right, moving on, fruits. All right, fruits get a lot of attention, that fruits are healthy and they're a great snack, and they are. Just please understand that fruit does have sugar in it, okay? But what counts as a fruit? Well, any fruit or 100% fruit juice counts as part of the fruit group. Now, it can be fresh, it can be canned, it can be frozen, it can be dried, it can be whole, cut up, pureed, you name it. There's all kinds of ways you can serve fruit, and I think that's the variety and the spice of life of it all. And the amount of fruit you need, as you can see by the chart, will depend on your age, sex, and level of physical activity. Amount needed can vary between 1 and 2 cups per day, and the suggestion is 1/4 of your plate should be fruits. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, do I need to have a fruit for every meal? No, not necessarily. You can actually break up that plate and pull it out. So if you want to have a piece of fruit later as a snack and eat a meal with only 3 sections or 4 sections, that's completely okay. But you can see about 2 cups for teenagers, and as you get older, adults, it's about 1.5 to 2 cups, depending on if you're male or female. Well, what does that look like? Well, if you only need about 2 cups, I'm going to tell you right now, it's really not hard to get that. It's usually 2 pieces of fruit for the most part. And 1, apple usually is 1 cup of fruit. 1 banana is 1 cup typically. So the other popular fruits that you can get your intake are grapes, cantaloupe, pears, strawberries, blueberries, grapefruit, oranges, peaches, watermelon. And then you can see over here 1 cup of fruit, 1 cup of fruit juice, or 1/2 cup of dried fruit because they don't have the water in it. That's all equivalent to 1 cup. Well, let's look at some more. Here's some other popular ones. You can pause the presentation or get the PDF that is attached to it and find out what sections. Now, all this information comes off of the USDA website, and you can access it there as well. But as you can see, here's all different equivalents of what would be 1 cup or 1 serving, considering most people only need 2 cups on a given day. It's pretty easy to get your fruit. All right, let's talk about vegetables. I love vegetables. This is a great way to add bulk to your diet and spice up a dinner plate. Vegetables that you eat, they can be raw, they can be cooked, they can be fresh, frozen, canned, or dry, dehydrated, and they may be whole, cut up, or mashed. Again, variety is the spice of life when it comes to vegetables. Any vegetable or 100% vegetable juice will count towards this. All right, and starchy versus non-starchy vegetables, we'll talk about that in a moment. And then you have different subgroups of vegetables as well. You have dark green vegetables, you have the starchy ones. Those are like potatoes and turnips. And then you have red and orange vegetables, again, the colors, beans and peas, and then other vegetables that don't fall into any of those categories. The suggestion is always make half of your plate fruits and vegetables. So if you have a dinner plate or a lunch plate, if you eat more than half vegetables, you will get your recommended amounts. Most people are between 2.5 and 3 cups of vegetables. Again, just like fruit, it's pretty easy to hit that if you watch it correctly. So, 2 settings, broccoli. I mean, a cup is not really that large. You cut up some broccoli, throw it in there, that's it. Usually 1 potato is almost equivalent to 2 cups. Not saying that potato should be your only vegetable, but it's not hard to get the vegetable intake that you would need. Here are some other recommended by subgroups and what you should get based upon your age and your gender. You can pause the presentation and take a look at what you can get. Now let's look at some popular vegetables that you can work into your diet to meet your daily need. Tomatoes, broccoli, peas, corn, potatoes, squash, beans, cabbage, mushrooms, onions, peppers. All of these, if you get 1 cup of raw or cooked vegetables, 1 cup of vegetable juice, or 2 cups of raw leafy greens, those are all considered 1 serving size or 1 cup. We'll take a look at some of the other vegetables on what you can get as far as equivalents. You'll see on the next table that sometimes a 1/2 cup will give you equal to 1 serving. So let's see what these are. Okay, so it breaks it into the different categories that we had already discussed: dark green, red and orange, beans, peas, starchy vegetables, other vegetables. Again, don't feel overwhelmed by this. This is just a guideline, and just say eat your colors. So the more vegetables that you eat, the better it's going to be. A lot of vegetables aren't very high in calories unless you're getting to the starchy vegetables like corn and potatoes. The rest of them are pretty low calorie, so if you overeat some vegetables, it's not going to really hurt you that bad. Okay, but you can see all of these are 1 cup vegetable equivalents, and what would be equivalent to a 1/2 cup. So in the table all the way to the right, you would need to double those to equal 1 serving. Okay, most of that has to do with spinach or leafy greens, but you can see that just all you gotta do is double all the way to the right, and that all equals 1 serving. And most people only need about three to 4 servings, but excess vegetables are never going to hurt you. All right, the milk dairy group, also known as the calcium group. I say that for vegans and vegetarians that abstain from dairy or milk product or any animal product. So the amount of dairy foods that you need to eat depends on, again, your age. And those who are physically active may need just a little bit more. Low-fat milk has the same amount of calcium and other essential nutrients, including protein, but less fat and calories. So it's always good to go with low-fat or non-fat. Just be careful of any added sugars that might be given to give it flavor. Foods made from milk that have limited calcium, and such as cream cheese, cream, and butter, are not part of the dairy group. All right, so just because you have butter, or you eat cream cheese, or you have cream in your coffee does not mean you're getting a serving of milk or dairy. Okay, your suggestions: 2 to 3 cups daily, and what you should do is try to have some calcium fortified soy drinks. This is big. A lot of people are anti-soy and anti anything that is not traditional animal product regarding dairy. But sometimes if that is the way you want to eat, calcium fortified drinks would help you. Now, daily recommendations on the right, you can see broken up by men or women, depending on age. Young children, boys and girls and teenagers are on the left, and then adults on the right. But usually about 2 to 3 cups, depending on how old you are. And it's really not hard. A glass of milk would be 2 cups. So anything added to cereal would be probably recommended amounts. So what are some popular dairy products? Milk, cream. All right, not all creams, but some of them, half and half, could fall. Yogurt, cheeses, cottage cheese, ice cream, soy milk. Although I would not specify ice cream as something where you should get your daily recommended amounts. That's more of a sugary food. So again, be careful of the added sugars added to any of these dairy products. All equivalents over here: 1 cup of milk, a cup of yogurt, a cup of soy milk, 1.5 ounces of cheese, which adds up pretty quickly. It's about the size of a couple dice, or 2 ounces of processed cheese. And if you don't know, I always suggest weighing your food. Again, recommended is low-fat or fat-free dairy options. So again, let's look at the equivalents here. What you can see: all right, milk, yogurt, cheese, and then milk-based desserts. Again, I would not advise the desserts. Use that as your extra calories should you want that. Okay. All right, so let's look at MyPlate. What are the pros and cons of it? I tend to be a little bit more of a Debbie Downer when it comes to MyPlate and food guidelines. Not saying that they are wrong; they're actually pretty spot on. It's just how the information is passed from one person to another. So let's look at the positives first. It's an easy visual. You get to see the plate. All right. It works for the average and busy person. So instead of saying, "Hey, you need to get 6 servings," the person's like, "Oh, I don't have time to think about what 6 servings are." Well, the plate will give you an easier visual. The goal is to limit calorie intake. That's always good. We can always use less calories. American society typically eats more, which is why we have such a problem with obesity epidemic in this country. Promotes whole, fresh, and unprocessed foods for consumption. That is huge. A lot of people think that the government guidelines push unhealthy foods. They don't. The big thing they always say is whole, fresh, or unprocessed foods should be your number one choice. They're never going to alienate the processed foods or the companies that make all these pre-made products. But if you eat, whole, fresh, and unprocessed foods, you're going to be more healthy. And I have to say that the guidelines are pretty thorough. They are right in what they tell you. Again, it's just information overload. So negatives. The plate size is not defined. Is it a 6-inch plate? Is it an 8-inch plate? Or is it a 12-inch plate? We don't know. I'm going to assume and tell you it's probably the 8-inch plate or even a 10-inch plate. How many meals should you eat in a day? Who made the rule that you should have 3 meals in a day? Is it 2? Anybody that talks about fasting will say that they probably eat 2 meals in a day. Some eat 3 just in a small window. Some like to eat 6 small meals a day, throughout the day to keep their metabolism up. There's no hard and fast rules, and it really doesn't tell you. It just says, oh, here's your plate, and this is what you should have. But if you eat 6 of those plates in a day, you might be leading yourself down to some problems. Serving size is not defined. Again, it just says if you hit that particular size. But if the plate is not defined, how do you know the serving size is? Because that cup of dairy, that little tiny plate, that could be like a small plate, or it could be a little tiny cup. We don't know how deep it is. There are problems with that. Not all groups are usually in each meal. It says half your each meal should be fruits and vegetables, but typically we eat fruits for breakfast or a snack, not for dinner, and vice versa with vegetables. So how do you do that? Can you break up the plate and eat it separately, or can you eat double this and one that? It doesn't really explain. It just puts more responsibility on the person eating as opposed to giving direct guidelines. There's no way to calculate calories, so counting your macronutrients is not necessarily easy. That is actually your best way to understand how much you should be eating, is by actually counting calories, counting your protein, counting your carbs, and where your calories are coming from. There is no exercise component, so a lot of people think that they can just eat and it'll be okay. Although diet is their first thing. If you control your diet, you'll be okay. Exercise helps, all right, but watch your diet. You can never out-exercise a bad diet, so watch your diet first. They don't really explain why you should have things and why you shouldn't, or how they do it. They just say, here's the information, here's the studies, and they use the studies as their why, and not really telling you, hey, you should do this because it's good for you. And then, like I said, it's information overload. There's so much information out there that it confuses people, and when you give too much to people, they give up on it, and they don't want to learn because it requires a thinking component. All right, so here's some tips for making a meal plan. All right, first, keep your list simple. So when you're writing out a list, keep it simple. If you ever realize and you get bored because your parents make the same thing or prepare the same foods every other week, or a couple times a month, there's a reason. It's because they know it works. It's easy to get done, and it fits your calorie intake. So meal planning and sometimes eating the same foods over and over again will make your life so much easier. Keep it simple. You don't have to overdo your ingredients and do fancy recipes. Sometimes you can just grill chicken, make pasta with just a tiny bit of olive oil or butter, and then have grilled or sauteed vegetables on the side, and you are all set. It's easy, it's simple, and it was not complicated in the least bit. Measuring or weighing food is huge. A lot of food waste and overeating happens because if we go from 8 ounces of meat or 2 servings for dinner, and we eat the 9 or 10, as opposed to cutting that off and saving it for another meal, we overeat now and we continue, and those little bit of ounces and calories over time can add up. Pantry items. These are olive oil, salt, pepper, spices. It's always good to have pantry items on hand. It might cost you a little bit up front, but you use them for a long period of time, and it can spice up a meal and be very helpful. Meal prepping. A lot of people, I don't have time to make meals. I don't have time to plan. I don't have time to cook. Well, you have to make time. And one day, and sometimes I do know people that, will spend, a couple hours on a Saturday or Sunday, and they will plan all their meals for the week. And they're like, well, I don't want to eat food that I've already cooked. Well, there's sacrifices to everything. You either have to cook it every day, you either have to set it aside every day, or you have to, reheat it every day. But you have to make that decision. There's going to be sacrifices. Eating healthy is part of a long lifestyle. And, if you make excuses for things, you're going to get to keep them if you defend them long enough. Leftovers. A lot of people don't like leftovers. Leftovers aren't a bad thing. All right. So if you over prep, you have meals for the next day, and it's less you have to worry about. And if you're already cooking, all right, having excess leftovers is not bad to have for the next day. You can use food planning links or food exercise journals to help document what you've done, because if you like certain meal plans and it was easier, you can always go back to it because you have it written. Okay? And just understand the concept for making a meal plan. You have input, which is your food, output is your energy. As long as you match your input and your output, right, you will be okay as far as your meal planning goes. So let's review some key points regarding our video lesson. MyPlate is the current recognized food guide published by the USDA. Now, the ultimate goal of MyPlate is personalization and giving people power over their own choices. Whether that's good or bad, I won't say. MyPlate was converted from the food pyramid to provide a better visual and representation of a meal. Now, there are 5 groups within MyPlate: protein, grains, fruits, vegetables, and dairy. Now, each food in that category has its own amount of recommendations, and it's up to you to learn those and do its serving size. Now, there are a variety of foods that fit into each of those categories that you can choose from. And again, it goes back to personalization, giving you the power to do what's best for you. And there are positives and negatives to the guidelines. It is up to each person to discover what works for them. And then if you follow the easy tips to plan out your healthy meals, you will make your life a lot easier. Now, I just have some closing thoughts. Remember, guidelines such as MyPlate are not strict, hard and fast rules. There's flexibility for each person to make choices to fulfill their needs. If you overeat one day, you just undereat the next. All right? If you eat really well throughout the week, you can have a cheat day or overeat just a little bit or have something that might not be as healthy. Again, it's all about moderation and still helping out your mind by not being hard and fast strict, because you will overwhelm yourself. Guidelines typically fail because learning the information requires a thinking step, and that most people don't want to do. So you have to overcome that yourself, and the more practice you do, the easier it gets. Health is ultimately a personal and family responsibility. You want to make food choices that will improve your energy, your vitality, your health, and your longevity. You want to be there to be with the people that you love and to experience the things that you want to. Ultimately, you want to balance the hedonic versus the eudaimonic way of thinking, the instant gratification versus the delayed gratification. We want to eat things that make us happy in the moment, but we also want to eat in a way that will make us happy in our general life going down the road. So remember, what tastes good and feels good right now, it may cost us later. A moment on the lips is forever on the hips, or so they say. You can enjoy unhealthy foods in moderation, but stick to fitness and health goals consistently, and that will help guide your food choices long term. I'd like to thank you for watching this video lesson. I hope you learned something. Again, MyPlate is there to help guide you and make food choices. It is up to you to make those good food choices. I hope this will help you and aid in those choices and promote a healthy lifestyle. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.